Welcome to Storytime. Enjoy with me. Open Doors, Kathy Paige, the Queen of Radio Interviews. Part 2.
And that was exactly what he did. Kathy was waiting for any little changes in his voice that might suggest that he was not sure about what he was saying. His voice was calm. It was not the voice of an old man. He was 40, but it had a quality that suggested strength of character. She questioned him at frequent intervals, listening carefully for any signs that might show his answers to be false. There were none. Everything Dr. Percival said was said in a way that suggested he was being completely truthful. All of his answers were clear and open. Kathy could find no fault with the man's voice or his reasoning. Finally, she asked the question she knew all her listeners were waiting for. Dr. Percival, you said that you could give me the means to see. That was a very personal thing to say. Were you being serious? Kathy listened. He had been good so far. If he was going to show weakness, it would surely be now. Miss Paige, let me apologize. This is it, thought Kathy. He's going to weaken. He knows he can't seriously support the things he says he can do. For what the papers reported, they named you in particular when, in fact, I had only used you as an example. What I actually said was that people whose nerves had been damaged, in the way yours had, for example, could be helped by my treatment. But Kathy, though she heard no sign of doubt in his voice, wanted him to be very exact with his answer. She knew her listeners expected no less. Dr. Percival, are you saying that you could make me see? Well, I'd have to see your medical records in more detail, but I think so. Yes. Yes, I could. It was time for the end of the program. Kathy thanked her guests, and the closing music was played. She felt excited, yet guilty for feeling that way. She had always thought that even if she had been given the chance to see, she would choose not to, not after a lifetime without sight. But at that time, there had been no hope. There had been no point in hoping. Hope was like a door shut, and with no key to open it. Ever. But now, this doctor sounded sure of himself. She was certain of that. For the first time since she was a girl, she allowed herself the hope of sight. She found that she did want to see. She wanted to see those pictures in the museums, the faces of her friends, the sky at dawn and the stars at night. She realized she wanted it very much indeed. Dr. Woodrow Percival had to rush off to his talk. He thanked her and left. Kathy heard the door of the studio close behind him. She knew that he might hold the key to doors that had been closed to her since birth. Could those doors really be opened for her? She knew she had to find out. The newspapers the next day were full of headlines about the interview. Famous blind radio star promised sight by American expert. Will this man give Kathy Paige her sight? Go for it, Kathy. The readers and listeners loved it. Mick Dean loved it. He immediately offered to pay all the costs involved if Kathy would work for his television company for just a few shows. But Kathy hated all the publicity. She was not afraid to speak up for her listeners, but she hated the idea of strangers making unwanted investigations into her private life. And this, as far as she was concerned, was a very private matter indeed. She refused all interviews on the subject and turned down Mick Dean's offer straight away. She thought it was nobody's business but her own, and that was final. No further mention was made of the subject on her show. Guests were asked not to raise the matter. They agreed, largely because they respected Kathy and could understand her situation. But Kathy had been busy. She didn't want the world to know about her personal life, so she had arranged to meet Dr. Woodrow Percival again in private. She met him at the house of her agent, away from her home and safe from the eyes of the public. Kathy was a wealthy woman. She had made, over the years, a lot of money from her work. She could afford the cost of the operation in Dr. Percival's hospital in California, USA. Dr. Percival was as calm as ever and was glad to help her. He drank his tea as he sat in an armchair, looking at Kathy as she fed Trudy a biscuit. "I must repeat," he said, "that you'll be the first person to receive this treatment. It has worked in all the tests and all the computer trials. Having said that, I must also remind you of the risk involved." "I understand, Dr. Percival," Kathy answered quickly. "I'm willing to take that risk. This is something I've made up my mind about. If it works for me, it'll work for others. It'll be worth it." "Now, don't misunderstand me, Miss Paige. By risk, I don't mean to your life. That risk is no more than it would be for any other operation. I mean the risk to your hopes. I am confident the operation will work, but I'm not God. Nobody can say for certain that you will have the use of your eyes at the end of all this. All I can say is there is no reason I can see why the operation shouldn't be a success. Are you still sure you want to go through with it?" Kathy took a deep breath, then answered, "Absolutely sure. When can you start?" The operation took place 1 month later at the hospital in California. Dr. Percival thought the operation went well. All that was needed now was a few weeks for the tiny computer parts to join with Kathy's sensitive, damaged eye nerves. During that time, Kathy would need to rest in bed with a bandage over her eyes. Her brain would be checked regularly. When it showed signs that the eye nerves were working, they would take the bandages off. In those few weeks, Kathy had plenty of time to think about what she had done. There were moments of doubt, almost panic, when she asked herself if she had done the right thing. She thought she had long since put away the foolish hopes for sight she had once held as a girl. Yet here she was, hoping like a girl again. She felt afraid, yes, but also excited at the thought of entering a world that would be totally new to her, a world where she could see. It would be like being born a second time. She wondered what colour would be like. Although it was a word she had often used and heard before, she had never experienced colour. She just could not imagine it, no matter how hard she tried. Kathy gave up trying and waited patiently for the day her bandages would be removed. The day came. Dr. Percival decided that Kathy's brain signals were doing all that he had expected of them. Things looked very promising. It was time to see if the operation had been a success. He closed all the curtains in Kathy's room so that the light was low. He turned to her and spoke. "Now, Kathy, we have to take things slowly. Even if things go well, you won't have full eyesight to begin with. First of all, let's see if your eyes are recognizing light. I'm going to take the bandage off and hold a light in front of your eyes. If you can see anything, you won't need me to tell you. You'll know. But you won't see anything clearly yet. That will come later. Are you ready?" Kathy nodded. Dr. Percival held a small light in front of her eyes as a nurse slowly and carefully removed her bandages. Kathy sat up with her eyes still closed. Slowly she opened them and stared at the light. Quickly she turned her face away.
Ow! What was that? It felt strange. There's something there, trying to get into my head.
Dr. Percival told the nurse to replace the bandages and then turned to Kathy.
"Kathy," he said with obvious delight, "that something is light. You've seen light for the first time. Congratulations. You can see."
Kathy could tell from his voice that he was pleased. She felt confused.
"But I thought there would be more to it than this. I mean... Oh, I don't know what I mean."
"Don't worry, Kathy," he said as he smiled. "All you saw then was pure light. It'll take a while for your eyes to get used to seeing colors and shapes. Your brain has a lot of sorting out of new information that it has never had to deal with before. It's bound to take a little while, even with the advanced training methods I've developed. The main thing is that you can see."
"I can see,"
said Kathy softly. And underneath her bandages, she was crying. Over the next few weeks, Kathy was progressively allowed to use her eyes more often. Soon, she could tell dark from light. Then she could recognize colors and shapes. But for a while, she found it very difficult to deal with the huge amounts of extra information that her new sense was giving her every day. One of her most difficult problems was judging distance. She found it hard to tell the difference between near and far objects. She would reach out for things across the room as if they were near to her, or she would walk into close objects without realizing how near they were. But Dr. Percival was patient. Kathy was taken on walks around the hospital gardens, taken for drives in the car, and shown videos and television programs. Her eyes were gently exercised until they worked well.
"In fact, Kathy," Dr. Percival told her, "your eyes are better than mine are. I need glasses and you don't."
What Kathy enjoyed most was seeing the pleasing effects shapes and colors produced. She would see ordinary things as objects of great beauty, the black and white squares on a chessboard, the shape of a hand, the colors of a flower. Sounds, for the first time in her life, took second place. Colors and shapes now filled her mind with pleasure beyond her powers to describe. But most of all, she was deeply fascinated by the changing expressions on the faces of people. She viewed every face she saw as a new world to explore, full of things to be discovered. Every smile, every frown was wonderful to her.
To be continued.